Agricola, 1st century conqueror of Britain, by Tacitus. 1. Famous men of old often had their lives and characters set on record, and even our generation, with all its indifference to the world around it, has not quite abandoned the practice. An outstanding personality can still triumph over that blind antipathy to virtue which is a defect of all states, small and great alike. In the past, however, the road to memorable achievement was not so uphill or so beset with obstacles, and the task of recording it never failed to attract men of genius. There was no question of partiality or self-seeking. The consciousness of an honourable aim was reward enough. Many even felt that to tell their own life story showed self-confidence rather than conceit. When Rutilius and Scaurus did so, they were neither disbelieved nor criticized, for noble character is best appreciated in those ages in which it can most readily develop. But in these times, when I planned to recount the life of one no longer with us, I had to crave an indulgence which I should not have sought for an invective, so savage and hostile to merit was the age. 2. Eulogies, indeed, were written by Arulenus Rusticus and Herennius Nescio, the one of Thracia Paetus, the other of Helvidius Priscus, but both were treated as capital offences, and the savage rage of their enemies was vented upon the books as well as upon their authors. The public executioners, under official instructions, made a bonfire in comitium and forum of those masterpieces of literary art. So much is in the record. In those fires doubtless the government imagined that it could silence the voice of Rome and annihilate the freedom of the Senate and men's knowledge of the truth. They even went on to banish the professors of philosophy and exile all honourable accomplishments, so that nothing decent might anywhere confront them. We have indeed set up a record of subservience. Rome of old explored the utmost limits of freedom. We have plumbed the depths of slavery, robbed as we are by informers even of the right to exchange ideas in conversation. We should have lost our memories as well as our tongues had it been as easy to forget as to be silent. 3. Now at long last our spirit revives. In the first dawn of this blessed age, never harmonized the old discord between autocracy and freedom. Day by day Trajan is enhancing the happiness of our times, and the national security, instead of being something to be hoped and prayed for, has attained the solid assurance of a prayer fulfilled. Yet our human nature is so weak that remedies take longer to work than diseases. Our bodies, which grow so slowly, perish in the twinkling of an eye. So too the mind and its pursuits can more easily be crushed than brought to life again. Idleness gradually develops a strange fascination of its own, and we end by loving the sloth that at first we loathed. Think of it, 15 whole years, no small part of a man's life, taken from us. Many have died by the chance happenings of fate. All the most energetic have fallen victims to the cruelty of the emperor. And the few of us that survive are no longer what we once were, since so many of our best years have been taken from us, years in which men in their prime have aged, and old men have reached the extreme limit of mortality without ever uttering a word. Yet I shall still find some satisfaction, however inartistic and unskilled my language, in recording the bondage we once suffered, and in acknowledging the blessings we now enjoy. In the meantime, this book, which sets out to honour my father-in-law Agricola, will be commended, or at least pardoned, for the loyal affection to which it bears witness. 4. Gnaeus Julius Agricola was born in the old and famous colony of Forum Julii. Both his grandfathers were procurators in the imperial service, the crowning dignity of the equestrian order. His father Julius Graecinus was a member of the Senate and won fame by his devotion to literature and philosophy. By those very accomplishments he incurred the wrath of the Emperor Gaius. He received orders to impeach Marcus Silanus and was afterwards put to death for refusing. Agricola's mother was Julia Procilla, a paragon of feminine virtue. Brought up under her tender care, he passed his boyhood and youth in the cultivation of all the liberal arts. He was shielded from the temptations of evil companions, partly by his own sound instincts, partly by living and going to school from his very early years at Massilia, a place where Greek refinement and provincial puritanism are happily blended. I remember how he would often tell us that in his early youth he was tempted to drink deeper of philosophy than was allowable for a Roman and a future senator, but that his mother, in her wisdom, damped the fire of his passion. One can well understand that his lofty, aspiring nature was attracted strongly, if not too wisely, by the fairness and splendor of fame in its higher and nobler aspects. In time, age and discretion cooled his ardor, and he always remembered the hardest lesson that philosophy teaches, a sense of proportion. 5. He served his military apprenticeship in Britain to the satisfaction of Suetonius Paulinus, a hard-working and sensible officer, who chose him for a staff appointment in order to assess his worth. Agricola was no loose young subaltern to turn his military career into a life of gaiety, and he would not make his staff captaincy and his inexperience an excuse for idly enjoying himself and continually going on leave. Instead, he got to know his province and made himself known to the troops. He learned from experts and chose the best models to follow. He never sought a duty for self-advertisement, never shirked one through cowardice. He always acted with energy and a sense of responsibility. Neither before nor since has Britain ever been in a more disturbed and perilous state. Veterans had been massacred, colonies burned to the ground, armies cut off. They had to fight for their lives before they could think of victory. The campaign, of course, was conducted under the direction and leadership of another, the commander to whom belonged the decisive success and the credit for recovering Britain. Yet everything combined to give the young Agricola fresh skill, experience, and ambition. And his spirit was possessed by a passion for military glory, a thankless passion in an age in which a sinister construction was put upon distinction and a great reputation was as dangerous as a bad one. 6. From Britain, Agricola returned to Rome to enter on his career of office and married Domitia Decidiana, the child of an illustrious house. It was a union that brought him social distinction and aid to his ambition for advancement. They lived in rare accord, maintained by mutual affection and unselfishness. In such a partnership, however, a good wife deserves more than half the praise, just as a bad one deserves more than half the blame. On being elected quaestor, the ballot assigned him Asia as his province and Salvius Titianus as his proconsul. Neither the one nor the other corrupted him, though the province, with its wealth, invited abuses, and the proconsul, an abject slave to greed, was prepared to indulge his subordinate to any extent. You wink at my offences, and I will wink at yours. While he was in Asia, a daughter was born to him, which both strengthened his position and consoled him for the loss shortly afterwards of a son born previously. He passed the interval between his quaestorship and his tribunate of the people, and also his year of office as tribune, in quiet retirement, for he understood the age of Nero, in which inactivity was tantamount to wisdom. His praetorship ran the same quiet course, since no judicial duties had fallen to his lot. In ordering the public games and the other vanities associated with his office, he compromised between economy and excess, steering clear of extravagance, but not failing to win popular approval. He was afterwards chosen by Galba to check over the gifts in the temple, and by diligently tracing stolen objects, he repaired the losses inflicted on the state by all the temple robbers except Nero. 7. The following year dealt a grievous blow to his heart and to his family fortunes. The men of Otho's fleet, marauding at large, made a savage raid on the neighbourhood of Intermilium in Liguria, murdered Agricola's mother on her own estate, and plundered both the estate and a large part of her fortune, which was what had tempted them to commit the crime. Agricola had accordingly set out to pay the last dues of affection when he was overtaken by news of Vespasian's bid for empire, and without a moment's hesitation joined his party. Mucianus was directing the inauguration of the new reign and the government of Rome, for Domitian was a very young man to whom his father's advancement meant nothing but license to enjoy himself. Mucianus sent Agricola to enroll recruits, and when he had performed that task with conscientious zeal, put him in command of the 20th Legion. It had been slow to transfer its allegiance, and its retiring commander was reported to be disloyal. Actually, since even governors of consular rank found this legion more than they could manage and were afraid of it, the fact that a praetorian commander lacked sufficient authority to control it may well have been the soldier's fault rather than his. Appointed therefore not merely to take over command, but also to mete out punishment, Agricola took disciplinary measures, but, with rare modesty, did his best to give the impression that no such measures had been necessary. 8. Britain at that time was governed by Vettius Bolanus, with a hand too gentle for a warlike province. Agricola moderated his energy and restrained his enthusiasm for fear of taking too much upon himself. He had learned the lesson of obedience and schooled himself to subordinate ambition to propriety. Shortly afterwards, Petillius Cerealis, a man of consular rank, was appointed governor. Agricola now had scope to display his good qualities, but at first it was merely hard work and danger that Cerealis shared with him. The glory came later. Several times he was entrusted with a detachment of the army to test his ability. Eventually, when he had passed the test, he was placed in command of larger forces. Yet he never sought to glorify himself by bragging of his achievements. It was his chief, he said, who planned all his successful operations, and he was merely the agent who executed them. Thus, by his efficiency in carrying out his orders, and by his modesty in speaking of what he had done, he won distinction without arousing jealousy. 9. On Agricola's return from his military command, the late Emperor Vespasian granted him the status of a patrician, and afterwards placed him in charge of the province of Aquitania, a splendid promotion to an important administrative post that was a stepping stone to the consulship, for which the emperor had in fact marked him out. It is a common belief that soldiers lack the power of fine discrimination, because the summary proceedings of a court-martial, tending as they do to be rough and ready, and often indeed high-handed, give no scope to forensic skill. But Agricola had the natural good sense, even in dealing with civilians, to show himself both agreeable and just. He made a clear division between hours of business and hours of relaxation. When the judicial duties of the assizes demanded attention, he was dignified, serious, and austere, though merciful whenever he could be. When duty had been discharged, he completely dropped his official air. As to sullenness or arrogance, he had long overcome any tendency to such faults, and he had the rare faculty of being familiar without weakening his authority, and austere without forfeiting people's affection. To mention incorruptibility and strict honesty in a man of his caliber would be to insult his virtues. Even fame, which often tempts the best of men, he would not seek by self-advertisement or intrigue. He avoided all rivalry with his colleagues and all bickering with the procurators, for he considered it undignified to win such battles and ignominious to be beaten. He was kept in his post for less than 3 years and then called home to the immediate prospect of the consulship. Public opinion insisted that the province of Britain was being offered to him, not because he said anything himself to suggest it, but because he was obviously the right man. Rumour is not always at fault. It may even prompt a selection. During his consulship, while I was in my early manhood, he betrothed to me his daughter, a girl who already showed rare promise, and after his term of office he gave her to me in marriage. His appointment to the command of Britain, coupled with the priestly office of a pontifex, followed immediately. 10. Although the geographical position and the inhabitants of Britain have been described by many authors, I shall describe them once again, not to match my industry and ability against theirs, but because the conquest was only completed in this period. Where my predecessors relied on graces of style to make their guesswork sound attractive, I shall offer ascertained fact. Britain, the largest of the islands known to us Romans, is of such a size and so situated as to run parallel to the coast of Germany on the east and to that of Spain on the west, while to the south it actually lies within sight of Gaul. Its northern shores, with no land facing them, are beaten by a wild and open sea. The general shape of Britain has been compared by Livy and by Fabius Rusticus, the finest of ancient and modern writers respectively, to an elongated diamond or a double-headed axe. Such indeed is its shape south of Caledonia, and so the same shape has been attributed to the whole, But when you go farther north, you find a huge and shapeless tract of country jutting out to form what is actually the most distant coastline and finally tapering into a kind of wedge. These remotest shores were now circumnavigated for the first time by a Roman fleet, which thus established the fact that Britain was an island. At the same time it discovered and subjugated the Orkney Islands, hitherto unknown. Thule too was sighted, but no more. Their orders took them no farther, and winter was close at hand. But report has it that this sea is sluggish and heavy to the oar, and even in a high wind does not rise as other seas do. The reason, I suppose, is that the lands and mountains which produce and sustain storms are farther apart there, and the deep mass of an unbroken expanse of sea is more slowly set in motion. To investigate the nature of ocean and its tides lies outside my subject, and the matter has often been discussed. I will add just one observation. Nowhere does the sea hold wider sway. It carries to and fro in its motion a mass of tidal currents, and in its ebb and flow it does not stop at the coast, but penetrates deep inland and winds about, pushing its way even among highlands and mountains as if in its own domain.